Good morning, Facebook. I'm excited today, guys. It's my first official podcast for Sensing the Senseless. I'm going to be starting off really slow with all this stuff. I don't have a person I'm interviewing today because I'm working out some stuff with Zoom. I am going to have a YouTube channel up under the title Sensing the Senseless. So this video will both be posted on Facebook just as a video. And then also a separate post that'll link to the YouTube channel. So I'd appreciate y'all's subscriptions. I really want to come at this idea from, a loving kindness sort of, even really like a little bit of a Buddhist approach to life and to politics. The goal of this podcast is to really try to do some real sense making of what's going on in America and the world right now. I'm going to interview a regular average American each week. We're going to talk about how these issues of race, COVID, Trump, all these major issues that affect us all, how they're affecting our relationships, how they're affecting our mental health, and how we're navigating through this sea of biased stuff. So I'm not going to be doing a bunch of edits on this. I just noticed I was swaying on my chair, so I'm not gonna start and stop the podcast. I'm not gonna clip and edit the podcast. So there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be unprofessional stuff. It's just going to be real. And the interviews, I'm super excited. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have a friend, Caleb Lee from Nashville, who is a bartender who had a QAnon roommate for quite some time. And we're going to dig deep into issues of like what's really going on with that from a firsthand experience, because most of us maybe don't have a really close QAnon friend. So I wanted to find somebody that had that perspective. I don't want to give QAnon a voice, so I don't want to interview a QAnon believer, but the closest thing would be somebody who's had a lot of one-on-one interaction with that. I've got a friend, James Holden, that's from California. We're going to do an interview. He is a LGBT libertarian, not to be confused with a Trump supporter. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be outside of the political mainstream in the gay world, what it's like to hang tight to libertarian and freedom ideals in a time when that's disappearing radically. Just so you can understand where I'm coming from, I am a progressive liberal. I am have some ideas that range very close to, the full party line of democratic socialism. But what's happened over the last year throughout COVID and throughout Trump and throughout the evolution of big tech's power grabs is I've brought in some libertarian ideals to my political ideologies. And as I've broadened my news, as I've de-mainstreamed my news, as I have done a lot of personal reflection on my own cognitive bias, and that's another thing I really want Sensing the Senseless to focus on is looking at our own cognitive bias. Why do certain ideals appeal to me? Why do certain news stations appeal to me? Why do certain memes, ads, statements by my Facebook friends, why do those trigger either excitement, anger, hate, all those things? Those are some things that I've been really looking at in my own life over the last year. And those are things that I really want to challenge all my listeners to join in, because this is the time, COVID has been a time to figure out who we are, to sit with ourselves and figure out what we want to change. And I see that a lot of America has come to this focus that we want to address racism. And wow, is it time to do that, But there's a hell of a lot more wrong in America and the world today than race relations. And so race will constantly be coming up in these podcasts. It's incredibly important. It's not incredibly decisive because racism needs to be fought, but how we go about it and some of the side effects of some of the philosophies that are brought into race theory, that are brought into identity politics, can have some really dangerous side effects, and we can mitigate those things together without stopping the fight against racism. I can learn about my white privilege. I can learn about what I can do as a white privileged male. Even though I fall into some marginalized groups myself, that I'll get into all throughout the podcast. So, you're going to get a lot of personal stuff from me. You're going to get deep dives into the person that I'm interviewing. We're not going to just stick to one topic. It's not going to be about their job. I'm not going to be interviewing CEOs of Amazon and all these things. I'm going to be talking to regular people. We're going to be talking about what this human journey is like, what 2021, what this moment in time, what challenges us, what's working for us, what's hurting our relationships, what's rebuilding our relationships, and most of all, how do we make sense of a world that's senseless? So I'm super excited. I want to start each pod. That's kind of just a little description to get y'all excited and going. Today, I want to start each podcast by just, setting that intention of what, of the fact that we're going to set aside, not our beliefs, not everything we hold dear, but set aside everything we think we know about a subject, everything we think has to be true, and look at the facts with a fresh and open mind. So if you're listening, just take a deep breath with me. I'm just going to take a breath. I'm just going to hold it for 4 seconds. I'm just going to let out all that fear, all of those expectations, all of that cognitive bias, everything that comes from Philip, everything that comes from everything that I think I know. And we're just going to talk together. We're just going to look together at stuff that's going on. So here we go. I made some notes. It's really hard. I have a computer, I have notes, and then I had to use my phone to record this. So this was fun. This was fun times. Everybody knows that I am literally massively addicted to social media. So all of the things that I'm challenging you to do about cognitive bias and the way social media is affecting you, I can promise you I am having to work on that in my own life. So, I get into the memes. I get into the cattiness. I love a Nancy Pelosi clap, but a lot goes on Facebook that really gets me thinking about society. And so I want to talk about a couple of ways I interact with people. I'm not going to use names, of course. And if you are a person who recognizes that I have, spoken about our interaction, feel free to yell at me or block me or, cancel me, because, that's what we do when we get upset, right? When I don't like the way someone else thinks, when I don't like the way someone else is talking to me, when I don't feel heard or comfortable or, respected or any of those things, I simply now remove that person immediately from my life and continue to ever inch into an isolated bubble of sameness, of like minds, of an echo chamber that feeds me only what I want to hear, only what I think is that I already think is right. And so, I had a friend who, was posting about violence, and he was talking about the right condemning violence and Christians condemning violence and all these things. And how can that go on? How can that anti-violence ideology, look at the hypocrisy of the Capitol stormers and all this stuff? And what I did was I just posted a meme that I got from my own friends as a comment on his page, and it was Nancy Pelosi at her desk, and the horned man, blue-faced man from the Capitol raid, mounted as a trophy hunted human on her wall. And I said, and then liberals promote violence back at them. And this caused such an incredible stir. And I just want, again, we're always going to bring sense-making in here. And, the title of this podcast, Sensing the Senseless, is there not to insult America and say that America is senseless, but to find where our sense-making is lacking and bring it there. And it's not about me being right, and it's not about these people being wrong. It's about how they think. It's about how we're processing information. So when a liberal person sees this meme, their first thought is, well, this is just funny. This is just a joke. But what sense making does is it asks you to put yourself into the body, into the mind, into the world of perception and the paradigm of a more centrist believing, a more conservative leaning person who is hearing the left cry out about violence and then sees the actions of the left, because we want our ideologies and our actions to line up. That's not hypocrisy. That's living your ideology. And so when I saw this meme being passed around, and it is funny, again, like I said, I love a Nancy Pelosi clap, but what I don't love is I don't love an entire group of people lumping another entire group of people together, labeling them as violent extremists, and then posting images of hunting humans and mounting them on walls. So, you can laugh all you want at it. You can say whatever you want about it. You can say it's not real, and so this is what some of the people think. Okay, I just want to read to you some of the comments. One of my favorites, maybe, I think I love it. He took it down. That's great. One of the comments was, tell me that you don't believe that this meme is real. And I thought, what an insult to someone's intelligence to be watching all the news about this horned man, about watching him getting arrested, getting all this information about everything he's ever done and ever been, and how he's in jail and how he's demanding an organic diet and all this stuff. And, to have somebody actually suggest, when you're making an argument, I get it. It's Facebook. It's not real life. When you're making an argument against somebody, first of all, these people assumed that I was a conservative. Second of all, they assumed I was a Trump supporter. Third of all, they assumed I was an idiot. What level of intelligence would you have to be to think that Nancy Pelosi actually mounted the head of the horned man on her wall? So, to even ask, again, so when you ask people questions like that, when you come back with these little witty comments, how does that make the person feel? And how does that affect your future interactions with that individual? It's absolutely horrifically ineffective. I went on, this went back and forth a little bit. People mostly just talked about the violence of the other side, had no interest in seeing what I was, I was showing them, this, that we were coming back from the left with these images of violence. They had absolutely no, so there's no interest in self-reflection. There's no interest in looking at the left. The left doesn't look at itself anymore. And that's what I'm asking you to do today. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm not here to convince you to be a conservative. I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm not here to defend a rioter. I am a liberal here to defend liberals. I'm here to ask you to be a better liberal and to discover what is tearing us down, because we just won the House and the Senate and the White House. But what we haven't won is our own hearts. We haven't won the ethical and moral position that we claim to hold. We are full today of the same hate, the same judgment, the same lack of open-mindedness, the same self-righteousness, the same dogmatic imposition of our beliefs on other people as the right. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to hear. And if this is where you end the podcast today and you can't keep following me after you hear that, I get it. I didn't want to hear that I had white privilege. I didn't want to hear any of the things that the left told me about myself. So here's another opportunity to hear from the left a way that you can grow. And it's totally up to you, even if you're open to that growth. How often do you ask yourselves, how can I be a better liberal? How can I be a better Democrat? How can I be a better American? How often do we ask ourselves that? So what happened with this exchange is that it went from a simple example of how the left is promoting violence to about 6 liberals jumping down my throat, yelling and screaming, comments at me, insulting my intelligence, not using any actual argumentative tools, not addressing anything in the sides. And I simply had to say to them, I just say, guys, I'm not interested in being talked to this way. You're ineffective, and I'm exiting. And the person whose post this was on didn't come back with any catty comments, but of course he clicked he clicked laugh on all of the witty comments of his people. And that's another thing that I see on social media is really, really subtle shaming. So we talk about in race theory, we talk about microaggressions, and microaggressions are a horrible, horrible thing that POCs in America have to face every day. And I'm not comparing my struggle to them in any way. What I'm comparing is that small things add up, and that little perceptions and things shift the way you feel, and not just feel, the way you recognize when you're being disrespected, and when your position and your intellect and your point of view is being simply discounted. And one of the ways we do that on social media that's not talked about at all is the laugh emoji. It's the laugh emoji. It comes up all the time on social media. You spend 5 or 10 minutes coming out with a carefully thought out response to something that's passionate in your heart, and the person whose post you're commenting on laughs at it, or his friends come on and laugh at that post. And maybe this is all ego. Maybe you're hearing this and you're like, Philip, you care way too much about what other people think. And that is absolutely goddamn true. I constantly struggle with needing outside validation, and so does Facebook. Facebook is our internet plugin to outside validation, and that doesn't change that there's a real person on the other side of the post. There's a real person on the other side of the comment. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that today. The main thing I want to talk about is an amazing podcast that a friend referred me to. Bret Weinstein's podcast called Dark Horse. It's available on Apple and Spotify and all the podcast locations. He did get censored this year. His Twitter account, I believe, is still shut down. He maybe it's his Facebook account that's still shut down. One of his major accounts was shut down. And then a lot of people cried out, and one of them got put back up. His podcasts are still up. He is a progressive liberal who left the academic world in sort of a little bit of a controversy over sort of like new woke politics being a little too extreme for him. So basically, I resonate with him because I identify as a liberal, but I don't believe that every box on the liberal checklist has to be checked off for me to feel a part of. I don't feel like I have to agree with every part of the liberal platform to not be silenced, to not be canceled, all these things. And so Bret is a super intelligent biologist. His wife is an evolutionary biologist. She's comes on the podcast a lot. And it's just super, super, super great. Definitely left of center, but definitely part of this new sort of sense-making group of a little bit dark web people. I hate that term. The intellectual dark web is not a term that I'm fond of. It's another one of these terms that's been weaponized, and we'll talk a lot about weaponization of terms on this show. So, we will not be using the word conspiracy. We will not be using, any of these terms that are simply built to discredit people. The number one thing you should be doing when you're seeing something is not asking if it's a conspiracy, but asking if there's evidence. Was there evidence that the ballots were fixed against Trump? No, there was no evidence. So they filed all these lawsuits, and they couldn't present any evidence to the court. So it becomes a conspiracy to me when you have no evidence. And I am never going to come to you with something of which there is no evidence. I may throw some theories out there. I'm not going to lie. But here we go. Back to Bret Weinstein. So cannot recommend his podcast enough. He's got a brother, Eric, who is another genius. These are two of the greatest progressive minds of our time. They are some of the only people out there really bringing in guests, really digging deep in a way. People hate Joe Rogan. I have huge issues with Joe Rogan. his podcasts are way too long. He I don't know. I don't want to talk about all these guys right now in a negative light, but I think that Eric and Bret do um, a much more loving version of what Joe Rogan tries to do, which is to maintain socially liberal ideals while actually being willing to ask questions that might not be politically correct, that might not being willing to look at evidence that shows fault in areas where we don't want to find fault. Those are things that are really hard to do for journalists right now, because when a journalist has a story and they go out and they do research and they find not what the mainstream narrative says, well, one, they can't even get their editor, their publisher to publish it. Two, if they go outside of the realm of mainstream media and they try to publish it, they get bashed and discredited and mowed over by the mainstream media and labeled, guess what, as a conspiracy theorist, or one of these other terms, or a Trump supporter, or or alt-right, or there's a lot of terms that get thrown out there, and you don't have to veer very far from the Liberal Party line before you get to one of those titles, and that's going to be a really big part of what we discuss throughout these podcasts. God, I love coffee. Let's talk about coffee for a second. Coffee, I am addicted. I am addicted to caffeine. I'm addicted to the aroma. I'm addicted to the experience. And I just got nothing but good things to say about it. Back to Bret Weistein. So when my friend showed me this podcast, I listened to a couple of them just to kind of get an idea of who he was before I listened to the current episode. And it's just out of this world. He interviews a journalist, and I was just trying to find his name on my page, which is fun. I wrote it down, I swear I did. There's a great example of how I can be more professional in the future. But his latest podcast episode interviews a journalist that was on the ground during the riots. And he is a left-center liberal who has been following protests for all of 2020. He's been to a lot of the major protests and has interviewed a lot of these crazy groups. And what I found this podcast to be absolutely fascinating. First of all, it was lengthy. It was about 2.5 hours. So it was a deep dive. And in these longer podcasts, you really get to, you get away from sound bites and sound blurbs and media spin. You get to hear what it's really was like for him. And the way he described it was, that we've got, the takeaway that I took from it was we're doing a real injustice to conservatives and to ourselves to lump all of these groups together, because the ideologies and goals range so strongly from the people that had arrived there. He did not deny that Trump encouraged these people. He did not deny that we need to prosecute these people. He did not in any way stand up for these people. What's important to remember is that these are people. These people are part of what America has become. But it's also important to remember math and statistics. So, you have 30 to 40,000 people outside the Capitol. You've got MAGA, you've got the Proud Boys, you've got Nazis, you've got anarchists, you've got radical constitutionalists, you've got these groups. And what I wanted to talk about was something that they kind of pointed out that really, really resonated with me, which was that on both sides, on the left and the right, on these rallies, when we refer to MAGA and Black Lives Matter, which is kind of the original, guys that are, coming together and having these big clashes at some of these rallies, starting in Charlottesville and all this stuff, they are really, really, really being used. Both contentious organizations, both strongly hated by the other side. And I'm a huge supporter of Black Lives Matter, so let's get that out there. And I'm absolutely roll my eyes at a person in a MAGA hat. However, what I'm talking about is how both of those two organizations are being subverted and used and actually manipulated and used as a cover by more extreme groups. So what happens is you have a MAGA rally and you have crazy Nazis that show up there. Now, what happens to the human mind, and here's where I'm going to have a discussion about cognitive bias, is it's impossible, and I've seen these posts, and that's actually one of my main topics, so I'm going to kind of jump to that. I wasn't planning to do it right now, but I'm going to do it. So one of the posts that I saw on Facebook that was being shared around was a really long description of, and it had this little preface that was to try to get you to sound open-minded, and it was like, how do I know that I'm not wrong? And then it says, well, if I'm on the side where there's Nazis, I must be on the wrong side. Now, that sounds great. And I don't want to be on the side of the Nazis. And I hope you don't either, because if so, this is not a match, a match for us, and you need to get some serious help. But I thought a lot about that, and I really saw it shared around a lot. It got a lot of great response from people, and and that line of arguing, the way that the construction was written, it felt very, very, very intentional. And I wonder a little bit about its original origins, but I'm sure it had, that there were good intentions behind it. It was to try to get people to see, hey, if you're in a group and you're trying to pick a side in a battle, you don't want to be on the side that the Nazis are on. Now that's true, and I'm not here to try to argue with that. What I am here to try to say is it's very dangerous to start, and here's where I'm going to jump into the two-party system. So every radical group has to pick from two sides and who they support, unless they just want their vote to not count. So yeah, we have Libertarian Party, we have the Communist Party, we have the Green Party. America is a two-party system. So when you say that the entire right is tarnished by the fact that the Nazis stand on that side, you're arguing from this perfect world of unfettered capitalism where you have every choice in front of you. So if that were true, the Nazis would be supporting the Nazi Party. If that were true, the libertarians, which do support the Libertarian Party, we would look at them that way. But these groups don't have, and thank goodness for some of them, because they're terrible radical groups, they don't have political representation. So yes, they chose that side. Well, let's talk about our side for a minute. Let's talk about the Communist Party. They vote left. Let's talk about Antifa. They vote left. Let's talk about really, really, really radical progressive left ideas like giving children puberty blockers at the age of 6. Let's talk about, abortion to the moment of birth when the baby is entirely viable. There's a lot of really radical views on the left that you are, in essence, once you make this argument about standing with the Nazis, you are then having to take that on ideologically. You're having to say, well, I'm choosing the side that stands for communism and killing children. And it's just simply not true. Neither argument is true. So I'm not here to tell you that you're on the side of communism. I'm here to tell you that 90% of conservatives in America were outraged by what happened at the Capitol. And what you're telling me back, and what I hear, I want you to know that I hear from you back, is, but by supporting Trump, you played a part in it. And that is true. If you're a Republican out there today and you saw what happened at the Capitol, I want to look directly into your eyes and tell you that I do not lump you with these radical extremists, but you are responsible for electing the leader that encouraged them. And I think that's what people feel in their hearts, and I feel like that's what gives people a right to try to put this whole group together. But what I also want to say to Republicans, and what I also want to ask of my liberal friends, is to stop putting half of the nation in the category of irredeemable. These people are not irredeemable. My mother, a lifelong Republican, is not irredeemable. She didn't vote for Trump. She changed her mind. The cancel culture that we've created is doing so much damage. Not just exacerbating the left and the right, not just, just adding to the human challenge of separation, which is what I feel that we're born here to realize is an illusion. And that's just a personal spiritual belief of mine. I'm not going to bring a bunch of that into the podcast, but, separation is the enemy. And what I've heard and seen on Facebook over this last week is that we are done with the other side. We are done. There is no more excuse. There is no more this. There is no more that. This is all about race. This is all about prejudice. This is all about selfishness. This is all about this. And, let's remember that things can be true and it's not all about race. It's about race. It's not all about selfishness. It's about selfishness. And it's getting a little long into the podcast, so I was going to try to cut it off at 30 minutes on this first week. They're going to tend, when I interview somebody, to be about an hour long, but I don't want to ramble forever. An analogy that I thought of this week was an incandescent light bulb. So, an incandescent light bulb is what we did at the beginning. And that's what I feel like some of these Black Lives Matter protests and this new resurgence of a really strong left was at the beginning. We have to start somewhere. We have to be bright and bold and hot and intense because we're overcoming the activation energy to get something done that's never been done before. But what happens over time and what's happening in our culture is that we're replacing these incandescent light bulbs, that 90% of the energy doesn't get turned into light. 90% of the energy gets turned into heat. And, if you've been to the store lately, you see these amazing LED lights, these fairly amazing fluorescent lights that produce the same amount of light with radically less heat, require radically less energy. They're radically more efficient, and they're radically more receptive and cooler to the touch. And what I'm trying to say is that 90% of our energy on the left right now is just dissipating into heat. It's dissipating into anger, and there's nothing productive coming from it. And the more we cancel, the more we stop talking, the more we stop putting ourselves in the position of other people, the less we have any effect, because we have to shift about 40 million people in the middle. We have to reach about 40 million people to create, even make progress into creating the world that we want to make. And I don't see any hope of that happening right now. But that doesn't mean that I don't have hope. It means that I see if we continue down the same road that we're going, we're not going to get to the destination that we're aiming for. So I want to challenge you this week. I want to wrap this up. I want you to challenge you this week to be a LED light, to think about your words, to think about your actions, to think about how we can reach the irredeemable, how we can shift our mindset to include more ideas, how we can stop viewing all of these groups as one entity how we can stop using the blanket terms of COVID or Trump or communism or any of these big, big weaponized words, and how we can look at each person as a human being here, a spiritual being on a human journey, struggling with the separation in the world, struggling with their own selfishness, struggling with their own cognitive bias, the lies and media manipulation that they've been told, and how we can look at ourselves and start to do the same thing. How we can be self-compassionate, how we can be self-reflective, and how we can grow and be willing to see our part in things. I want to challenge you with your catty and witty comments and laughs on Facebook. I want to challenge you to find a person in your life that believes a little bit different from you and listen to them. I want to challenge you to talk to them, not about this mainstream narrative, but about your experience and about why progressive ideals, about how they bring a more fulfilling life for you, about how the open-mindedness of the Liberal Party can stay open-minded. Anyways, that's kind of a lot. I'm really, really, really excited about what's coming up. I want you to check out that YouTube channel, Sensing the Senseless. If you want to email me and discuss stuff that you heard in this podcast, you can email me at sensingthesenseless@gmail.com. I mentioned those upcoming interviews. I cannot wait to talk about some of the more of these deeper issues. I mean, we got crazy controversial stuff going on in the world these days with COVID and with the vaccine rollout and with, I'm trying not to use the word Trump a whole bunch, but there's so much to talk about. So many exciting things coming up. And I really thank you if you made it to the end of the podcast today. I know there's a million podcasts out there. I know that I'm new at this. I know that I have a lot to say. It might not be comfortable for everybody to hear. But I was finding my outlet of just simply posting on Facebook to just not be enough to really, really talk through where I'm at. And people were starting to private message me and asking me if I was a Trump supporter. And people were, people were blocking me and, doing all this stuff. And I was just like, you know what? People aren't hearing the full idea and the full experience of what I think is going on. And so, this may mean nothing to you. You may never watch again. But if these type of ideas interest you, click like, share this video. Help me get the message out there. If you think you're the type of person that has a lot to say about some of these issues, if you're open-minded and you don't have to agree with me, but if you're interested in getting your voice out there, your perspective out there, and think you'd be a great candidate for an interview, message me. I'm all about it. I think America needs to hear the voice of America a hell of a lot more. I think we need to hear the voice of the individual a hell of a lot more. And I think we need to dissolve these issues of red and blue. I think we need to dissolve these issues of lumping everything into Trump or no Trump, Republican and Democrat. I think, the more we can see each person as a person who's struggling and growing and learning, and it's not that no one is irredeemable. Almost no one. There's some serious bad apples out there, but if we can recognize that 99.9% of humans are redeemable, maybe we can remember that we are. So on that, I'll end, and I'll see you all next Friday. Have a good day.